Today we step into a marriage that begins to die with one sentence. Evelyn stood beneath the golden arch of the Romano Foundation ballroom, her fingers tight around a champagne flute. 15 feet away, her husband, Dante, stood against the Manhattan skyline. His voice cut through the music. "She's useful," he told his investors, "but she'll never be my real wife." In that moment, 2 years of devotion collapsed. She had loved a man who saw her as part of a deal. The night had started like any other elite gathering, flashing cameras, polished smiles, powerful men pretending they were civilized. But in that crowded room, Evelyn had never felt more invisible. She wore the blue silk dress his team had chosen, a dress so expensive it made her feel less like a wife and more like a display piece. The diamonds at her throat felt cold, almost like a beautiful collar. She had played the role of the perfect underworld wife without complaint. Now the illusion was gone. Evelyn placed her shaking glass on a passing tray before it slipped from her hand. The server never even looked at her. Everyone knew Dante's wife, but no one really saw Evelyn. She moved through the ballroom on instinct, giving polite smiles while the string quartet played. Even the family crest carved into ice looked like another expensive lie. "Evelyn, darling," a sharp voice called, forcing her to turn. Margaret approached with the bright, hungry smile of a woman who lived for gossip. She asked if the dress had come from Milan. Evelyn quietly admitted Dante's stylist had chosen it. Margaret smirked and said it must be nice not to worry about such tedious decisions. The insult landed cleanly. "You do not even own your own life." Evelyn excused herself and walked away before her face betrayed her. Her heels struck the marble as she passed men and women who traded marriages like investments. She hurried down a corridor and stepped onto the empty terrace. The October wind bit into her skin. Below, the city glittered and roared, indifferent to the woman falling apart above it. Evelyn gripped the stone railing and tried to breathe. "She's useful, but never my real wife." The words circled in her mind until they felt carved into her chest. She wore his ring. She smiled for his cameras. She carried his name. But some part of her had always known what was missing. His love had never truly reached her. A deep voice behind her warned that she would freeze out there. Evelyn went rigid. Dante's footsteps came closer, and then his heavy jacket settled over her shoulders, smelling of cologne and smoke. He scolded her for leaving the room and reminded her people were watching. She stared at the skyline with him, standing behind her close enough to warm her, still too far to touch her heart. Did something happen? His voice was careful, almost gentle. "Yes," she thought. "I finally heard what I am to you." But aloud, she lied, "I'm fine." "Dante," she turned toward him, and the pain of looking at him nearly took her breath. He was beautiful in that cold, dangerous way, slate-gray eyes, controlled expression, the kind of man who could silence a room and still miss his own wife breaking in front of him. He studied her like she was a problem to solve. "You re-upset," he said. "I'm cold." She whispered, "I want to go home." "Please," something raw passed across his face. But only for a second. Then the mask returned. "We stay another hour," he said. "Of course. Appearances came first. Then I'll wait in the car," she said, pushing his jacket back into his chest. She walked through the crowded ballroom and let the whispers follow her. Let them talk. She was already drowning inside this beautiful empty life. The ride back was silent, with Manhattan streetlights sliding across the window. When she entered the penthouse, it felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Cold marble floors, perfectly arranged rooms, a museum where a family was supposed to live. She kicked off her heels and let the dress fall around her feet as she scrubbed away the makeup. She watched the stranger Dante's world had made of her disappear in the mirror. A ghost stared back at her. When had the vibrant girl she used to be vanished? She climbed into their massive bed and stayed on her side. City lights bled through the tall windows. She shut her eyes, but Dante's words kept finding her around 2 a.m. The front door clicked open. She heard his measured steps, the clink of ice in a whiskey glass. Then the cigarette he always smoked on the balcony, after a brutal day in his underworld. The bedroom door creaked open. Evelyn held her breath and lay perfectly still. She felt his gaze from the doorway, heavy and unreadable. After a moment, the latch clicked shut, and his footsteps faded away. Evelyn stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day followed the same script that had exhausted her for 2 years. Coffee humming at 6. Dante dressing with crisp, efficient movements. Usually she would rise and make breakfast just to feel useful. That morning, her body felt like stone. She stayed in bed, hollowed out. The door opened. "Yuri still in bed," Dante said, surprised. "I am tired," she replied, facing the wall. "Are you sick?" No, she refused to look at him. It startled her. How quiet heartbreak could be. The world kept moving as if nothing had changed, while everything inside her had already collapsed. Evelyn lay still, staring at a pale water stain on the ceiling. It had been there for 6 months. Dante had never noticed it. "Evelyn, you should go," he said. "Meeting at 8. 9, she replied, her voice flat. The silence tightened around them. She could feel him trying to read her, the way he read enemies and contracts. Good luck, she thought, when the door finally closed with its expensive whisper. She was alone in the museum of their marriage. She caught her reflection in the chrome of the espresso machine and barely recognized herself. Her phone vibrated. Maria, probably hungry for gossip about the gala. Evelyn almost laughed. "I learned my husband does consider our marriage real. But the canapés were excellent." The thought tasted like ash. Instead, she sent Maria a vague excuse and dropped the phone onto the counter. For the first time, she really looked at the gilded cage around her, every velvet chair chosen by designers, every painting approved by consultants. The penthouse had been built for the Dante Moretti brand. Everything belonged there except her. Convenient. Useful, not loved. In the days that followed, a quiet rebellion began. She stopped fixing his crooked tie. She stayed asleep when he came home at 2 in the morning. She stopped asking about the deals that swallowed him whole. She became a ghost in her own home present, but no longer available. Dante noticed. You did not build a criminal empire by missing small changes. He survived by reading the tremor in a liar's hand, the slight shift in loyalty before betrayal. You've been quiet lately, he murmured one evening, his laptop casting shadows across his face. Evelyn looked up. Have I? He studied her like a contract with hidden terms. Yuri not fine. Then what am I? Dante, she snapped, sharper than she meant to. You seem to know everything else. Genuine shock crossed his hardened face. She had never challenged him like that before. I am tired. I am going to bed, she whispered, leaving him alone with the cold glow of the screen. That night, something in their foundation cracked for good. Evelyn had pushed back, and neither of them could pretend not to hear it. Then fate called at the worst possible time. It happened on a quiet Thursday while Dante was locked in his study. Mrs. Moretti. This is Sandra from Emerson Publishing. Evelyn's heart seized. Months earlier, during one of her loneliest nights, she had sent an application just to prove she still had a life beyond this marriage. You've been accepted for our Boston office, the woman said. Boston, not Manhattan. Not the penthouse. Boston, where she could be Evelyn again. Are you still there? Mrs. Moretti. Yes, she breathed. Can I have some time to think? When the call ended, the silence felt enormous. Boston meant starting over with almost nothing. A cramped apartment in a neighborhood Dante would never enter. A job that belonged to her, not to his name. It meant leaving everything she thought she had built. But as she looked around, the truth landed hard. She had not built any of it. Clothes she had not chosen. A home she had not decorated. A role in a marriage that had always felt staged. Before fear could stop her, she opened her laptop. Boston rentals, budgets, the real cost of starting again. For 2 weeks, she quietly untangled her life from his empire. Then Serena walked in. It happened at a dinner party thick with mafia brass and polished threats. Evelyn was enduring polite conversation when she heard the whisper. Serena's back from Milan. Everyone thought she'd be the one he married. Evelyn kept her smile in place. But something inside her shifted. Serena was effortlessly stunning, carrying herself like a woman born to rule Dante's world. Charmed, Serena purred, offering a flawless hand. I've heard so much about you. Funny, Evelyn replied, her mask slipping. I haven't heard a single thing about you. It came out too sharp, too honest. Serena's eyes sparked with amusement. Dante and I go way back. But that's ancient history now, Serena said. Evelyn wanted to believe her. Then she watched them across the room. The shared looks. The private jokes. The way Dante's shoulders loosened near her. For a few minutes, the cold boss disappeared, and a relaxed man stood in his place, one Evelyn had never been allowed to meet. That night, she booked a one-way ticket to Boston. She buried the email in a folder called Recipes. Somewhere he would never look. She bought a suitcase and began the slow work of erasing herself. A summer dress here. An old paperback there. But secrecy makes people careless. 3 weeks before her escape, she left the closet door cracked while the shower ran. She stepped out of the steam clutching a towel, and the air left her lungs. Dante stood in the middle of the bedroom. Holding one of her folded sweaters, behind him, the hidden suitcase lay open on the bed, her quiet rebellion exposed. His face was unreadable. Explain this, her blood went cold. She had planned to vanish like a ghost and leave only a note behind. It's not what you think, she stammered. Really, his voice was smooth as a blade. Because it looks like my wife is packing to leave me. The words cut through the room. How long, Evelyn? He did not yell, that made it worse. Since the gala, she whispered. He set the sweater down with painful care. 2 months of lying to me. What do you call packing in secret? Dante demanded. Surviving. The word tore out of her before she could stop it. Evelyn sank onto the bed as her legs gave out. At the gala. She choked. I heard you. Confusion cracked his stone face. What did I say? That I was useful. Her voice broke. But I'd never be your real wife. She watched understanding hit him. The great strategist finally rewound his careless words and saw the damage. Evelyn don't know. She cut in. I was a strategic acquisition. So tell me, Dante, what am I to you? For the first time, the boss had no answer. He stood in the wreckage of their bedroom, completely lost. You are my wife, Dante finally said, the words heavy in the cold air. But to Evelyn, it sounded like paperwork, a label, a role. She looked at him, desperate for something real. Do you love me? She asked, her voice shaking. Have you ever loved me? His silence crushed the last piece of hope she had protected. Evelyn let out a broken laugh and began throwing clothes into her suitcase. He asked where she was going, as if she were something he had misplaced. She could not stay in this beautiful prison anymore. Not when every room reminded her how little she had truly mattered. Wife, partner, family, the words meant nothing if there was no tenderness behind them. Boston, she said. The word cut through the room like cold wind. Dante flinched as if she had struck him. You can visit, she added bitterly, to keep up appearances. His voice dropped to a dangerous softness. She begged him to tell her why he had really married her. Was any of it real? There stood Dante Moretti, a man who commanded half of New York, paralyzed by one question from his wife. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Evelyn zipped the suitcase as tears spilled down her cheeks. He begged her to wait, but she was done translating his silence into something kinder than it was. Some truths only have power if they are spoken, before the person you love walks away. I'm tired of turning everything you do into what I wish it meant, she whispered. She was tired of loving a man who gave her only shadows, love. There it was, finally out in the open. She had loved him since that early date at the little Italian place, when he had seemed like a man instead of a kingpin. I am leaving, she told him, grabbing her bag. Dante caught her wrist, not roughly, desperately. Don't go, he pleaded. She looked at his hand, then at his eyes, and saw real terror there, the fear of a man losing his anchor. But terror was not enough. One desperate grip could not undo years of letting her slip away. Let me go, she said. They stood frozen, his fingers around her wrist, the weight of their failed marriage pressing down on them. After what felt like forever, his grip loosened. Evelyn walked away, passing the cold, expensive art in a penthouse that had never felt like home. At the door, she glanced back. Dante stood perfectly still, hollow-faced, like a man watching his empire burn from the inside. Goodbye, Dante, she whispered, stepping out before love could drag her back. Downstairs, she waved away his private driver and hailed a regular taxi. She needed the messy real world, far from his control. Leaving comfort was hard. Staying where her soul was shrinking would have been harder. The driver asked no questions. He simply pulled into traffic. As Manhattan's lights blurred past the windows, Evelyn finally broke. Not pretty tears. Ugly, gasping sobs from a woman whose heart had just been torn open. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dante, begging her to come back. She turned it off. Everything that mattered now fit inside one small suitcase. Miles behind her, the most feared man in the city stood alone in his dark penthouse, tasting regret for the first time. Soon Evelyn was curled under a blanket on Maria's worn couch, surrounded by the comforting smell of old coffee. Maria offered tea, silence, and a place to hide. That was more kindness than any penthouse had ever given her. Maria told her she could stay as long as she needed. No explanations required. That was the gift of a true friend, knowing when not to ask. Evelyn's phone had been exploding for hours. 17 missed calls. Dozens of messages. Dante's texts shifted from commands to desperation, until the final one arrived at 4 a.m. "I am sorry." 2 words the Mafia Boss had probably never said easily in his life. But an apology could not put shattered glass back together. She powered the phone down. Maria gently warned her that he would come looking. And Evelyn knew she was right. Dante Moretti never simply let things go, especially when his control had been broken. She was still his wife, still a vital piece on the board of his dark empire. The only question was when he would appear. 3 days later, a heavy knock sounded at Maria's door. Not the downstairs buzzer, the actual apartment door. He had bypassed every lock. Evelyn slowly set down the dish she was drying. When she opened the door, Dante stood there in an immaculate suit, but his face was haunted. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes. His rigid posture barely held together the collapse underneath. He had used his driver's logs to find her, proving that hiding from an underworld king was never simple. He asked for 5 minutes. "You had 2 years to talk to me," she said, her voice steady. "What changed?" Dante's jaw tightened. The great boss looked as if he were fighting a war inside himself. "You left," he growled, the words bitter and furious. He hated how badly her absence had broken him. Evelyn grabbed her coat and refused to let him inside. Instead, she led him down to his waiting black sedan. Once the heavy doors closed, the back seat felt airless. She told him to speak. For the first time in his ruthless life, Dante looked unsure. Power meant nothing here. He could command men, move money, and frighten enemies, but he did not know how to talk to the wife he had wounded. He looked like a man who had practiced a speech 1,000 times and forgotten every word. He asked her to understand his coldness. But to Evelyn, it was simple. She had been treated like a tool, not a partner. Dante rubbed his face, and the vulnerability of that gesture startled her. He confessed that in his world, love was a fatal weakness. If his rivals knew she owned his heart, she would become a target. He had protected her by pretending she meant nothing. That was survival. He insisted, his voice cracking under the weight of his own lie. Evelyn stared at him. "You thought breaking me was protection." Dante looked away. "Years ago, Vincent's wife was taken because someone found out she mattered to him," he said quietly. By the time Vincent gave in to their demands, she had been missing for 6 days. Dante's face darkened, and Evelyn felt a chill move through her. She had heard whispers about the violence beneath his empire, but she had chosen not to look too closely. "So you thought lying was protection?" she asked. "I thought distance kept you alive," he replied. "If they believed we were only a business arrangement, you would be safer. Except I heard you say I would never be your real wife." "I had to believe it," he whispered, "because if I let myself feel it." He stopped, choking on the admission. Evelyn did not let him hide there. "You begged for 5 minutes," she said. "Use them." Dante looked at her, and something heavy inside him finally gave way. His eyes were full of agony, fear, loss, and a desperate love he no longer had the strength to disguise. "You became the first thing I looked for every night," he said quietly. "I walk into that penthouse, and all I cared about was whether you smiled at me like I was a man, not a monster. That terrified me. In my world, Love gets people buried. The confession hung between them. Evelyn wanted to reach for him, but 2 years of loneliness held her back. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I'm a coward, he said with a bitter laugh. I can face rival bosses and men with guns. But telling my own wife how much I need her, that broke me. So if I kept you at a distance and called it safety, did it work? She asked. Did not loving me keep me safe? The silence answered before he did. No, he whispered. It didn't he. Evelyn closed her eyes. This should have felt like victory, but it felt more like a funeral. I am still going to Boston, she said softly. His body went rigid. You had 2 years to trust me. Dante instead. You chose fear. I need time. I need to know who I am when I'm not just Dante's useful wife. That is what you are, he pleaded. Then what am I? I spent 2 years wearing expensive dresses, smiling at dangerous men, and swallowing my own voice. Somewhere inside that penthouse, I lost myself. Let me help you find yourself again. You can tea, she replied. You are the reason I disappeared. She saw the words wound him, but she did not take them back. His world had taken up all the air in her life. When does your flight leave? He asked, hollowed out. Saturday, 3 days. She swallowed hard. I'm not sure of anything, Dante, except that I can keep waiting for you to love me the way I already love you. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Shock washed over his face, followed by pure pain. Your 5 minutes are up, she whispered, before he could answer. She opened the door and stepped into the freezing air. Upstairs, Maria was waiting. A good friend knows when silence is kinder than questions. She simply poured a glass of wine. Evelyn's powered-down phone sat on the table like an accusation. 2 days passed in a miserable fog, while she avoided every reminder of the mafia life she had left behind. On Friday, Maria came home early, dread written across her face. Dante has been calling me, she admitted. Evelyn's blood went cold. He said if you want to leave, he won't stop you, Maria explained. But he wants to see you one last time. No, Evelyn snapped. There's nothing left to say, are you sure? He sounded different, like something finally got through. That's what scares me, Evelyn said. Because if I hear him sound human, I might forget why I'm leaving. The honesty shocked them both into silence. Saturday morning arrived bitter and gray, as Maria drove her to the airport. She filled the car with nervous chatter and squeezed Evelyn's hand at every red light. Go be yourself, Maria whispered as she hugged her goodbye. Not his wife, not his symbol, just you. Just you, Evelyn gave a weak smile. When did you get so wise? Probably when my best friend married a mafia boss, Maria said. Evelyn grabbed her suitcase and tried not to think about the dangerous man she was leaving. The terminal was crowded and chaotic. She sat with terrible coffee, watching planes rise into the gray sky. Then her phone buzzed. She had only just turned it on, and her stomach dropped. A text from Dante. I know your flight leaves at 11:15. I won't stop you, but I need you to know something. Her heart slammed against her ribs as another message appeared. I failed you. I treated my emotions like a liability and you like an asset. I told myself it was protection, he wrote. But I was only protecting myself from admitting I needed you. Evelyn stared at the screen, unable to breathe. You asked what you are to me. You are the only person who ever made me want to be better. The only one who saw past the monster. I was terrified to admit it because it would destroy me if you left. Now you were leaving anyway. Her hands shook as she read the words again. This was the honesty she had begged for. The proof that she had mattered. So why did it hurt like her chest had been opened? A final message appeared. Go to Boston. Build your life. If you're ever ready, I'll be here. Learning how to become a man who deserves you. The airport blurred around her rolling suitcases, tired faces, announcements echoing overhead. Evelyn stood frozen, tears falling onto her phone before she realized she was crying. Flight 2847 to Boston. She moved down the jet bridge like a sleepwalker, ticket in hand, freedom only a few steps away. Passengers pushed past, annoyed by the woman blocking their path. One more step onto that plane meant closing the door on Dante, maybe forever. It meant accepting that their marriage had died before either of them had learned how to speak honestly. A flight attendant's impatient voice snapped her back. Evelyn looked down the jet bridge, torn between the pain of staying and the terror of leaving. The words came out before she could stop them. I can get on this plane. She turned around and fought her way back through the stream of confused passengers. By the time she reached the terminal, she was already calling him. Dante answered on the first ring. His voice sounded wrecked, caught somewhere between terror and hope. She told him she could not leave without seeing him first. Heavy breathing filled the line. When he asked what that meant, she was honest. They needed one real conversation. Not a negotiation, not a rescue. If she came back, it would not be because he begged well enough. It would be because the truth was finally strong enough to stand on. His answer was rough and broken. Okay, I am coming back, she told him. But she made it clear this was not forgiveness. She was not returning to be the quiet mafia wife. If they were going to try, he had to stop locking her outside his heart and calling it protection. I promise, he said. Promises from Dante Moretti usually came wrapped in contracts, threats, and leverage. This time, his voice had nothing to hide behind. The taxi ride back to Manhattan felt endless. Traffic barely moved. The driver kept trying to make small talk while Evelyn sat in the back seat, stomach twisted into knots. Was she making a terrible mistake? Maybe, but she knew one thing clearly. She would not leave her own life unfinished because of his silence. At least this time. She was walking into the fire with her eyes open. The penthouse greeted her with the same cold marble, but something had changed. His suit jacket was thrown over a chair. A dirty coffee mug sat abandoned on the table. Papers were scattered everywhere. For once the place looked lived in. Dante stood in the hallway wearing yesterday's clothes. His hair was a mess, and every trace of the untouchable mafia boss had slipped away. You came back, he breathed. They stood there like two strangers who had shared a bed for 2 years without truly knowing each other. Finally, he admitted he did not know how to be vulnerable. Then I guess we figure it out honestly, she said, dropping her suitcase. She crossed the room and stopped just inches from him. Her voice lowered as she told him the truth. Hearing him deny their marriage at the gala had shattered her, but what destroyed her was how easily he had pretended nothing was wrong afterward. Dante's voice went raw. He swore that every day with her had been real, even if he hid behind walls. The cruelty at the gala had been politics. His family wanted him to marry Serena, a woman with the perfect underworld bloodline. He said those words to make them back off and keep Evelyn away from that world. Evelyn listened, but she did not let the explanation become an excuse. Dante's composure cracked. He confessed that he had told his family she would never be a strategic alliance because she belonged only to him, not to the business. The word mine came out possessive and painfully honest. Tears gathered in Evelyn's eyes. I needed to hear that 2 years ago, she whispered. They stood in the immaculate penthouse, trying to build a foundation they had skipped from the start. She set her boundary clearly. She would not go back to being a silent ghost who fixed his ties and ignored the distances between them. She would not serve as decoration in his dangerous world. Dante reached for her slowly, carefully, as if one wrong move might make her vanish. His calloused hands cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. He told her he did not want obedience anymore. He wanted her anger when he worked too late. He wanted her to call him out when he shut down. He wanted her to take up space in his life, not disappear inside it. He was sick of having a useful wife. He wanted something real. Then the distance between them broke. He kissed her. And it was not a careful kiss meant for cameras. It was messy and desperate, 2 years of silence spilling out in one breath. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn warned him it would be difficult. There would be real fights, painful ones. Dante swore he was ready for all of it. I promise, he whispered, and from a man who treated words like loaded weapons it sounded like a vow. Okay, she breathed, we try. We build something real. The weight on Dante's shoulders seemed to loosen. He pulled her close, and for the first time, Evelyn let herself lean into him without bracing for disappointment. Afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, touching two people who were finally beginning again. Nothing was magically fixed, but at least it felt honest. The following weeks were unfamiliar and uneven. Dante came home for dinner. He spoke about pressure, threats, and the weight of ruling a brutal empire. Evelyn listened, but she also learned to ask questions he could not dodge. Evelyn gave him her own ghosts. She told him what it had felt like to be invisible, to erase herself just to play the flawless wife. They fought hard, but differently now. Dante would retreat behind his cold walls, and Evelyn would not chase him like a servant begging for crumbs. She would stand still and make him come back with words. Then came the Friday that tested every promise. Dante came home early and found Evelyn in his study. Her face drained of warmth. On his screen was Serena's name. Again and again. "Who is Serena Lauren to you now?" she asked. Dante went still. "Are you sleeping with her?" "No," he choked out. "Absolutely not." "Then why are you meeting her in secret?" Evelyn's voice trembled, but she did not back away. "Why didn't you mention her once while we've been learning how to be honest?" Dante closed the heavy door and stepped toward her like she was a live wire. "She works with the Foundation," he said. "We re-coordinating security. Security does not require 4 lunches. It is complicated. Everything with you is complicated." She shouted. "I am not asking for a clean life. I am asking not to be treated like a fool in my own marriage. I hid it because I knew you'd react exactly like this." He snapped. "Like a wife who found the same old secret wearing a new suit." The words struck hard. "Like someone looking for a reason to leave again," Dante said. Evelyn went very still. The old version of her would have cried. The new one simply looked at him until his anger began to die. "You don't get to turn your secrecy into my weakness," she said. "You don't get to hide the truth and blame me for bleeding when I find it." Dante's face changed, defeat replacing fury. "You don't trust me." "I'm trying to," she answered, "but you keep giving me evidence against you." The room went silent. Rebuilding trust was not one dramatic confession. It was every ordinary choice after it, and he had just chosen wrong. "I don't know how to do this," Dante whispered. A man who had spent his life using secrets as weapons now stood completely unarmed. "You're asking me to trust that honesty won't destroy everything." Evelyn did not blink. "Yes, because I can spend my life wondering what you're hiding." Then came that awful silence. The kind that confirms your fear before anyone speaks. Dante swallowed. "Serena called me 2 weeks ago. I met her." Evelyn's heart pounded. "She told me she made a mistake years ago." He continued, the confession settling between them like poison. "She said she's ready now. If I am," the past had walked back in. And Dante had let it sit across from him without telling his wife. "And what did you say?" Evelyn asked. Dangerously quiet. Dante dragged his hands through his hair. "Drowning, I told her I am married." Evelyn gave a bitter laugh. "That's paperwork." "Dante, what did you say as a man?" His eyes begged her to understand. He said he had gone only to prove Serena meant nothing. "She's everything my family wanted," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But with her, I feel nothing. With you, I feel too much. It scares me. And it's the only thing that makes me feel human." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but belief was no longer enough. She needed action that did not arrive only after damage had been done. "I should have said no to the meetings," Dante confessed. The rawness in his voice softened Evelyn's anger, though she refused to let it erase the wound. "No more secrets," she said. "I don't care if you think I'll overreact. You tell me everything. That's what marriage means. Not just sharing the easy things, but trusting me with the hard ones too." Dante nodded and accepted it. Then he admitted there was one final meeting with Serena on Monday. Evelyn did not flinch. "Then I am coming with you." Non-negotiable. If their marriage was going to survive his darkness. She refused to stand outside the door again. He could not call her his partner and leave her waiting in the hall. "You want me to trust you. You want to prove this marriage is real. Then we face her together." Evelyn watched him process it. She could see the ruthless boss who hated being challenged fighting with the husband, trying desperately to learn compromise. "Okay," he finally said. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Evelyn did not wear the designer clothes Dante's stylist preferred. She chose a simple black dress. Her own armor. Together they entered a private midtown restaurant, where powerful people whispered their sins over expensive coffee. Evelyn walked beside him, not behind him, and for the first time, Dante did not try to correct the distance. Serena was already seated, draped in cream and gold, looking like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. "Dante," she breathed, then froze when she saw Evelyn. "I didn't realize you were bringing her." Dante's hand settled at the small of Evelyn's back. Quiet but unmistakable. When they sat, serened every polished smile at Dante, leaning into his space with practiced ease. Evelyn watched calmly as Dante pulled back. "I've been thinking about what I said," Serena purred, ignoring Evelyn completely. "About my mistake years ago." Evelyn placed her napkin on her lap and smiled without warmth. The old chapter had come to reopen itself. This time, she would not be written out of her own story. "I'm finally in a place where I could be the kind of partner you need," Serena said. Dante did not look at her mouth, her hands, or the pass she was offering. He looked at Evelyn first. Then he turned back. "I already have a partner," he said, his voice steady as stone. He reached across the table and laced his fingers through Evelyn's. Serena's perfect smile cracked. Evelyn leaned forward, calm but sharp. "Dante and I are working on our marriage. There is no room for whatever you think you're reoffering." Serena tried to soften it, but Evelyn cut her off. "You saw a weakness and called it timing. That was your mistake." Serena stared at their joined hands and understood she had lost more than a man. After Serena finished the protocols, Dante gave his final nod, and he and Evelyn stepped outside into the cold Manhattan air. She needed to know he meant what he had promised. He pulled her close as strangers moved around them beneath the city lights. "I choose you every day," he whispered, "especially the hard ones." She leaned into his chest and wanted to believe him. For a few hours, it almost felt possible. Then the illusion cracked. Evelyn was in bed when Dante's voice thundered from the study. Loud, furious. The tone that meant violence was close. She found him at the window, gripping the phone, his jaw locked tight in the shadows. "I don't care what he wants. The answer is no." Dante barked into the phone. "Tell him you'll regret this." He ended the call, his broad shoulders tight with cold anger. Evelyn asked softly what was wrong. "Nothing," he said too smoothly. "Business," and just like that, the vault closed again. The husband who had been trying to open up vanished, replaced by the Mafia Boss who ruled through silence. "You re-shutting me out again," she whispered. He turned to her, his face hardening. "Some things are mine to handle." She stepped closer, refusing to be pushed back into the dark. "Then tell me where business ends and our life begins." "I'm trying to trust you," Evelyn said. "But you make it impossible." Dante turned away from the glass, dismissing her. "This conversation is over." Something in her chest caught fire. "You don't get to decide when we're redone," she snapped. He spun back, fury burning in his eyes. He said he was trying to protect her from the bloodiest parts of his world. His enemies wanted him dead, and they would use her without hesitation. "So keeping me safe means keeping me blind?" she asked. "Yes," he said. The answer was so immediate, so certain, that something inside her broke clean in two. "Then this second chance is over," she said, terrifyingly calm. Dante froze. "This isn't me running away," Evelyn told him. "This is me refusing to shrink again." Dante stared at her as if the sentence had changed the room. "You're overreacting," he said, but his voice had already lost strength. "No, I am reacting to the truth." His face hardened, and he asked if she really wanted to know about missing men, retaliation, blood in the streets. "Yes," she said. "Because that darkness is already in our bedroom. It is in every silence and every calculated stare." She would rather face the truth than keep guessing at the shape of it. "What kind of marriage is this if you keep choosing control over me?" "I've never lied to you," Dante insisted. "Omission is still lying." Evelyn shot back. "You've been hiding the truth since our wedding day." A brutal silence filled the room. "I don't know how to give you what you want," he admitted. "Then I guess we redone," she whispered. She walked into the bedroom and pulled out her suitcase. Dante appeared in the doorway, panic stripping away his cold armor. He begged her to stay and talk. But words could not repair a foundation that kept cracking in the same place. "You can trust me with your real life," she said. "So what is the point?" Dante's voice broke in the heavy air. "The point is, I love you." It was the first time he said it, and the tragedy was that hearing it hurt more than silence. "You love me enough to say it when I am leaving," Evelyn cried, tears finally spilling over. but not enough to let me stand beside you. He pleaded that he was trying. But she could see the truth. He could not cling to control and expect intimacy to survive. Love required surrender. And he still did not know how to let go. She zipped the bag and faced him. I love you too, she whispered. But love is enough if you won't let me in. Then she walked past him. This time, the fearsome mob boss did not reach for her. The penthouse door closed with devastating finality. Soon, Evelyn climbed into a midnight taxi. Mascara streaked down her face, carrying a suitcase that felt heavier than stone. The driver asked no questions. Manhattan blurred beyond the glass. The city lights that once seemed romantic now looked hollow. Her phone rang. Dante, she declined it. It rang again. She powered it off. Later, Maria took one look at her and pulled her inside without a word. They sat in the dark while Evelyn cried the kind of tears that scrape the soul raw. He finally said he loved me. She choked out at 3 a.m, and it was tea enough. Maria looked at her gently. Words are cheap. Evelyn had never heard anything truer. Maybe I was a fool to think a mafia boss could actually love someone. Evelyn whispered. Maria did not argue. Evelyn finally slept wrapped in blankets that smelled like a normal, quiet life. When she woke to the gray morning and turned her phone back on, 47 missed calls appeared. 31 were from Dante. Desperate messages begged her to come home. Carlo texted to make sure she was safe. Then an unknown number appeared. Vincent Russo. One of Dante's most dangerous associates offered his quiet help. The message sent ice through her veins. If Russo was already reaching out, the underworld she had tried to escape was no longer something behind Dante's doors. It was outside Maria's apartment. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Against her better judgment. She answered. Detective Chen from the New York Police Department introduced himself and asked about Dante's business. Evelyn felt her heart stop. Is he hurt? She gasped. No, the detective said. But they wanted her perspective on his activities. She stalled, asked for time, and ended the call. The law was closing in. A devoted wife would have warned him immediately. But blind loyalty to someone who kept her in the dark felt like another trap. Maria walked in and sensed the dread filling the room. Are you okay? She asked softly. Evelyn looked up, eyes wide with fresh fear. The police just called me, she whispered. They want to talk about Dante. Later, Evelyn wrestled with herself. Why protect a man who had hidden so much from her? But she knew the painful truth. Whatever darkness ruled Dante's world, she could not be the one to bring the hammer down on him. Not only because she loved him, but because betrayal was not who she wanted to become. She called the precinct. I can help you, detective, she said evenly. I didn't have any information. She hung up before he could push. Then came the harder call. Dante answered on the first ring. The police called me, she said. His tone went dangerously neutral. What did they want? I told them I didn't know anything. A long pause followed. Thank you, he breathed. Evelyn sat on the phone, feeling something inside her fracture. I did it because it is the truth, she told him. Dante exhaled heavily and begged for one more meeting, but Evelyn was already trying to move forward. I called a lawyer this morning, she said softly. The paperwork is coming. His voice dropped to a desperate whisper. He promised to change, but she knew the pattern too well. You always promise to try, Dante, she said, but trying is not doing. I can spend my life waiting for you to learn how to be real. She heard the panic in his breath as he asked what he had to do. Evelyn had no answer, if he did not know by now. She could not teach him by bleeding herself dry. Evelyn ended the call before his pleas could weaken her. Her hands shook as she left the phone on the counter, staring at it like a ticking bomb. The apartment felt suffocatingly quiet. She poured coffee she had no intention of drinking. The weight of starting a life without Dante settling over her. Then the screen lit up. A message told her to learn the real truth about her husband before walking away. Meet me at Café Luca at noon. Come alone. It was signed with a simple S, Serena. Every cautious part of Evelyn told her to ignore it, but curiosity pulled harder than fear. If Serena was a snake, Evelyn wanted to see the venom before it struck. At noon, she pushed open the doors of the small, Shadowed cafe. Far from Dante's glittering empire. Serena waited in the corner. Perfectly composed. 2 dark espressos between them. You came, she said smoothly. She slid a thick envelope across the wooden table. I wanted you to know the truth before you make anything permanent. Evelyn did not sit right away. If this is another performance. Make it short. Serena's smile barely moved. Evelyn pulled out a heavy stack of papers. Bank contracts. Legal files. Photographs. Not wedding pictures, but cold surveillance shots taken from a distance. Messy notes along the borders read, target acquisition successful. Asset secured. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. What is this? She asked, her voice hollow. Serena looked at her with quiet pity. Proof that your marriage was a business deal, not a romance. It was about your grandfather. He left you $30 million in a hidden trust. The illusion cracked in front of her. Serena explained that the trust had strict conditions. Evelyn had to marry before turning 30 in order to claim it. Look at the timeline. Serena said. He died in March, you met Dante in May. A rushed wedding in September 1 month before you turned 30 and the money unlocked. The documents blurred in Evelyn's vision. Everything fit too neatly. You were the key, Serena said. Dante needed capital and you opened the door. Evelyn shook her head. But he told me he loved me. Serena's face softened. And that made it worse. He tells people what they need to hear. I know because I once wanted to believe him too. She stood, casting a shadow across the papers. Leave him now. Before you waste your life on a man who only loves control. Then she was gone. Evelyn sat alone in the quiet cafe as every memory she cherished began to twist into something ugly. The whirlwind romance. The tender proposal. None of it felt safe anymore. She felt foolish. Sick to her core. She had been another asset in his empire. A clean financial acquisition. The love story she had held onto became a cold, calculated heist. Just as her first tear hit the table, her phone vibrated. Dante. She let the screen go dark, but it kept ringing. Relentless. Finally, she answered. What do you want? Dante's voice was tight with panic. He demanded to know where she was, and insisted he needed to know she was safe. Safe, Evelyn let out a broken laugh. Why, Dante? To protect your investment. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sharp silence of a man caught in his own trap. My grandfather's trust, she said, her voice shaking with grief. $30 million. She heard his breath catch. That single sound told her enough to hurt her. Who told you? He demanded. Is it true? He tried to explain. Did you know before our first date? She asked, begging him to choose honesty over strategy. The silence stretched. Then came one devastating word. Yes, when that word left his mouth. Something inside Evelyn went still and cold. Everything was a lie. She whispered. Every kiss. Every late-night talk. The ring on my finger. Dante's voice was rough. Stripped of control. It started with information. He admitted. But it changed. I swear it changed. But Evelyn was hollow now. I didn't have to believe a single word you say ever again. She told him. You slept beside me for 2 years and lied to my face. He begged her to listen. He claimed the facts had been twisted, but admitted he had known pieces of the financial picture. Stop, she cried. You don't even know where truth ends and strategy begins. There is a silence right before a heart breaks, and Evelyn heard it clearly. She stood in the crowded cafe, numb to the strangers staring at her. Dante's voice came through the phone, quiet and desperate. Tell me where you are. I'll come to you. We can talk face to face. Evelyn smiled bitterly. So you can look me in the eye and lie more convincingly. The truth was out. Or at least enough of it to destroy her. He had known about money. She had been kept ignorant. The romance. The whispered promises in the dark. The beautiful beginning, it all felt staged. She ended the call and stepped into the biting November wind. She wandered for hours through unfamiliar streets, letting the cold punish her until her face felt as numb as her heart. Maria took one look at her and pulled her inside. As she read through the documents, fury darkened her face. That calculating son of a bitch, Maria whispered. Evelyn sat frozen. drowning in shame, saying over and over that she had been stupid. But Maria stopped her. No, trusting someone doesn't make you stupid. Using that trust makes him guilty. Still, it felt like Evelyn's fault. She felt she should have seen the calculation behind every gentle touch and every midnight confession. Then the phone started buzzing. Dante, she declined it. It rang again. Over the next 3 days, he refused to let go. He called constantly, paced outside Maria's building, until the doorman threatened to call the police. Sent his men. Sent flowers. She threw all of it away. For days, Evelyn drifted through the apartment like a ghost trapped in the ruins of a life that might never have been real. Then, on the 4th day, her lawyer called with news that made her blood run cold. Dante had filed a legal objection to the divorce, claiming their marriage had never been consummated. It was a lie. A stalling tactic designed to drag the nightmare out for months. Her lawyer thought Dante was buying time, hoping she would break. But Evelyn felt another possibility sink into her stomach. If he could prove the marriage was fake, he could argue that the trust money had been obtained fraudulently. Dante Moretti never surrendered anything easily. Then the knife twisted deeper. Her lawyer added that Dante had also filed for spousal support. $50,000 a month. That was the price he had put on her freedom. Evelyn gripped the phone, her voice shaking as she told the lawyer she wanted nothing from him. No money, no property, just a signed paper letting her go. But the trap had already closed. Dante still held the reins from the shadows, making sure she could not simply walk away. That night, the dam finally broke. She collapsed into Maria's arms and sobbed until she could barely breathe. Mourning a man who might never have existed felt unbearably cruel. I hate him, she cried. I hate him, but I still love him. And I didn't know how to stop. Maria held her and told her she only had to survive one day at a time. A week later, the world shifted. Maria shook Evelyn awake and pointed to a glowing laptop screen. There it was in black and white. Manhattan crime boss arrested. Grainy security footage showed Dante being led away in handcuffs. Police had raided his warehouses and found illegal weapons along with enough stolen goods to bury him in federal prison for years. Evelyn thought revenge might feel like relief. Instead, she stared at his blank face on the screen and felt empty. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. It was Frank, Dante's uncle. His voice was grim. Dante was in federal custody, allowed only one phone call, and he had chosen to use it on her. Her heart stopped. Frank demanded a yes or no, against every instinct. Evelyn whispered yes. A hollow click sounded on the line, followed by Dante's voice. He sounded rough, exhausted, stripped of every layer of armor. He only wanted to know if she was safe. But this was not a social call. He begged her to go to his study, to the safe behind the Rothko painting. The code was her birthday. Inside was a flash drive she had to deliver only to his lawyer. Evelyn accused him of manipulating her again and refused to be his pawn. Then his tone broke into pure desperation. Innocent people would die, he warned. He swore it not on his life, but on whatever real, agonizing feeling he had for her. I swear on that, he whispered into the dark. Evelyn closed her eyes under the weight of it. I hate you, she said, her voice breaking. Still, she agreed to help, even after everything he had done. Evelyn could not let innocent blood be spilled. She agreed coldly, reminding him that this changed nothing between them. His voice cracked as he apologized for every calculated lie and every moment he had made her feel worthless. Too late, she whispered, then ended the call. 2 hours later, she stepped into the penthouse. It felt like walking into a mausoleum. His jacket still hung over a chair. Her books still lay on the table. Time had frozen on the night she left. She found the painting, entered her birthday, and opened the safe. The drive was there. Beside it lay a handwritten letter addressed to her. She knew she should take the drive and leave. Instead, her trembling hands unfolded the paper. The ink carried the confession of a broken man. If you are reading this, Dante had written, something has gone terribly wrong. He confessed that he had written the letter only 3 weeks after their wedding. 3 weeks after realizing he had made the worst mistake of his life by dragging her into his dark world. He admitted the ugly truth. He had approached her with strategy. The same cold calculation he used on the streets. But then she changed everything. She looked at him not as a monster, but as a man. That simple grace terrified him more than any gun. So he built walls. He kept her legally tied to him while holding her at an icy distance. He protected his own damaged heart by slowly destroying hers. He asked for no forgiveness. He did not even expect her to believe him. But he needed her to know she had never been just an asset. She was the one true flame in a life built on calculated shadows. I love you. The letter read, I loved you 3 weeks in, and I will love you even when you move on to a man who truly deserves you. He left the flash drive in her hands, along with enough evidence to ruin half the crime families in New York. The choice was hers. Evelyn stared at the date at the top of the page. 2 years ago. For 2 years. This dangerous, unreachable man had carried that love in silence while leaving her in the dark. The truth did not free her. It only opened a new wound. She sank into his leather chair, the letter shaking in her hands. Lost in the wreckage of his heart, she no longer knew what was real. Was the letter another layer of manipulation? A final move in a longer game? All she knew was that her husband was sitting in a federal cell, and she held his life in her hands. The silence broke when her phone rang. Dante's attorney. Mrs. Moretti. Did you find the drive? He asked, dread lacing his voice. Yes, she said softly. Bring it to me now, he urged. Dangerous men are looking for it. That tiny piece of metal held enough secrets to dismantle multiple criminal syndicates, including Dante's empire. Everyone wanted it. No one could be trusted with it. Why did he tell me where it was? Evelyn asked the lawyer. A pause hung over the line. Because you read the only person he trusts. She ended the call and stared at the drive. She should have wanted to watch his empire burn. But her fingers stayed curled around the metal. Heavy footsteps echoed through the penthouse. Her blood turned cold. A man stepped into the doorway in a sharp suit, his eyes empty of warmth. Mrs. Moretti, he said softly, his tone carrying a dark promise. Who are you? She whispered. Marcus Webb, he said with a thin smile. He told Evelyn he worked with her husband, then demanded the flash drive in her hand. She played dumb, but Marcus coldly listed her every move: the jailhouse call, the open safe, the prize she was holding. When she refused, he pulled a gun, not in rage, with terrifying calm. He explained that the secrets on that drive could destroy him, and his survival mattered more than her life. Evelyn's blood seemed to turn to ice water. For 2 years, she had lived near Dante's brutal reality without feeling its teeth. Now staring down a loaded weapon, she finally understood exactly what she had married into. If I don't get that drive, I am finished anyway, Marcus growled, blocking her only exit. Prosecutors will put me away for 30 years. Evelyn's mind spun. They were locked inside Dante's soundproof penthouse. Nobody was coming. How did you get in? She asked, stalling for time. But Marcus was losing patience. Her eyes darted from the gun to the desperate man to the drive in her hand. In a split second, she hurled the drive not at him, but at the bulletproof window behind him. The clatter made Marcus flinch. Evelyn ran. She did not go for the door. She dove for Dante's heavy oak desk, and the bottom drawer he always kept locked. Her trembling fingers found the unlocked drawer and closed around the cold steel of a hidden gun. She spun just as Marcus recovered. 2 trapped people now stood armed and terrified. You don't know how to use that, Marcus warned. Do you want to bet your life on that? She shot back. She had never fired a weapon, but panic made her voice sound convincing. Her ragged breathing filled the room. Then a shadow fell across the doorway. Vincent Russo stood there, a man who knew the cost of the underworld better than most. Evelyn put the gun down. He ordered. I can tea, she whispered. Marcus, you too. Weapons down. Now Marcus narrowed his eyes and growled that it was none of his concern. It concerns me when you threaten his wife, Vincent said. Put it down, or I put you down. Marcus hesitated, then dropped his weapon. Evelyn kept hers raised, her trust shattered beyond recognition. You too, Vincent said, more gently this time. If I wanted you gone, you'd already be gone. Dante called in every favor he had to keep you alive. Her arms aching, Evelyn surrendered the heavy gun. Vincent sent Marcus into the night and turned the lock with a final click. Then he picked up the fallen flash drive and told her Dante wanted it taken to his lawyer. When she asked why he was helping, Vincent's answer was simple: because Dante saved my wife when everyone else looked away. When they took her, Dante didn't calculate the cost. Vincent explained. He just brought her home. So when he asks me to protect you. Evelyn held the drive, her fingers numb. Dante had used his only phone call to secure her safety while his own empire fell apart. She did not know whether that was love, guilt, or another form of control. Maybe all three. I don't know what's real anymore, she whispered, fighting tears. Vincent told her to focus on surviving. They drove through bleak Manhattan streets in an armored car, silence pressing heavily between them. He dropped her outside a drab office building. I can come up, he admitted, but you'll be safe. Evelyn watched the car disappear, her legs trembling as she entered the building. The office was a shrine to discretion, filled with people paid to make problems vanish. She was led into a sterile room where two men waited. One was Dante's lawyer. The other had the cold posture of law enforcement. When he introduced himself as FBI agent David Morrison, the air left Evelyn's lungs. Morrison quickly assured her she was not under arrest. He wanted the drive in her hand. Your husband has been documenting criminal activity for 5 years, he said, opening his laptop. Evelyn sank into a chair, clutching the flash drive like it was the last solid thing in her life. The laptop lit up the city's darkest corners. Names, dates, bloody transactions, enough poison to sink politicians, police and criminals alike. Evelyn stared at the screen. Why would Dante build such an arsenal? Leverage, maybe, or conscience, buried under years of survival. This could clean up the city, Morrison urged. But Chen's voice cut through his ambition. Or it will get people killed. There will be blood in the streets, and Evelyn will be the prime target. Morrison pushed back and offered her witness protection. A new name, an erased past, a ghost life. They promised Dante a deal if she surrendered the drive. Evelyn sat trapped between two impossible choices, holding a burden she had never asked for. Evelyn looked down at the small drive in her palm. Such a tiny thing, capable of destroying an empire. Morrison pressed harder, warning that silence meant corrupt, men stayed in power, and Dante spent 20 years behind bars. Someone will find you, he said, and they won to ask politely. Marcus' gun flashed in her memory, and the violent truth of Dante's world closed around her. I need to think, she said, forcing strength into her voice. Morrison objected, but Chen intervened and sent him out. When the door shut, the lawyer looked at her with unsettling clarity. Not what's strategic, Chen said softly. Not what is safe or what everyone says is right. What do you actually want? The question pulled the truth straight from her. I want to not be married to a liar, she confessed, her voice shaking with exhaustion. I want to not love someone who used me. She hated how childish it sounded. And how true. Evelyn made her final demand. She needed to look Dante in the eyes without lawyers, strategies, or performances between them. She needed the truth. If he broke her heart one more time, she would hand over the drive and vanish for good. Chen agreed to try. What followed were 3 agonizing days in a sterile safe house. 3 days of blank walls, cold takeout, and memories of hidden guns and devastating lies closing in whenever she tried to sleep. Chen finally called. He had secured 15 stolen minutes at the detention center. The prison was a monument to despair, gray walls, harsh lights, and the smell of bleach trying to cover lost hope. They took her belongings and led her to a cramped room with a bolted metal table. She waited with her heart hammering. Then the heavy door groaned open. Dante looked like a fallen king. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a harsh uniform. Dark circles bruised his eyes. Defeat weighed on his posture. Yet when his gaze locked with hers, something fierce still burned there. He sat across from her. They were close enough to touch, separated by an ocean of betrayal. Dante thanked her quietly, but Evelyn was all frost. She demanded the truth before deciding what to do with the flash drive. She gave him exactly 15 minutes and warned him to stop performing. 2 years together had taught her how to read the spaces he left empty. Dante took a ragged breath and gave her the ugliest answer. He said he had married her for her money. His criminal syndicate needed $30 million to go legitimate, and her trust fund had been the perfect target. He claimed he had studied her routines and arranged their chance meeting with cold precision. Evelyn did not move. The confession was so clean, so perfectly damning, that for the first time she wondered if he was lying to make her hate him. The words cut deep anyway. She asked when it had changed. He took her back to their fourth date, that small Brooklyn place with cheap wine. She had talked about her grandfather's lessons on integrity. Dante said that was when he understood the depth of his cowardice. He had told himself ignorance would protect her, but fear had been the real architect of every wall between them. Evelyn pressed her trembling hands against the cold metal table. "You sound like you rehearsed this," she whispered. Dante looked away. For 1 second, the mask slipped. There it was. Guilt, love, and something like surrender. He was confessing to being the villain, but his eyes did not match the story. She asked about the letter in the safe. Was any of it real? Dante swore every word was true. He had written it 2 years ago, barely 3 weeks into their marriage, when he realized he could not imagine the penthouse without her. She demanded to know why he had waited until everything was in ruins to confess. A desperate war moved behind his eyes. "Because I was broken," he finally admitted. His father had beaten into him that love was weakness and vulnerability was death. He did not know how to hold her without breaking her, so he broke her anyway. His voice cracked as he apologized for the lies, the coldness, the times he made her feel invisible. Evelyn let the tears fall. Dante reached out, his hand hovering, waiting she did not pull away. His fingers closed around hers, heavy and warm. He confessed that loving her had terrified him. It terrified him so much that he destroyed their marriage, rather than admit how badly he needed her. When a gun was pulled on her, he had been ready to burn the world down just to break out and protect her. He had used his only phone call to make sure she was safe, choosing her life over his own freedom, facing 20 years in a federal cell. He was still thinking of her first. She mentioned the flash drive, the one thing that could buy him a deal. Dante refused at once. Using it would put innocent families in the line of fire. Dante insisted that innocent children should never pay for their father's sins. He had crossed lines, done things he could never erase. Prison felt like a debt finally coming due. But Evelyn was innocent. She had never asked for the shadows or the deception. He begged her to use the drive for her own future, not to save a man who belonged in a cage. He wanted her to stop choosing out of guilt and start choosing the life she truly wanted. A heavy knock sounded on the door. 2 minutes left. Evelyn squeezed his hand and admitted she had no idea what she wanted anymore. Dante gave her a sad smile and told her to take her time, since he was not going anywhere. A hollow laugh escaped her. "I hate you," she whispered, "and I hate that I still love you." His voice broke as he thanked her for being the one beautiful truth in a life built on calculation. She pulled her hand away and took a few steps toward the door before stopping. She asked the question that frightened her most. If she used the drive to free him, what would become of them? Dante met her eyes with naked honesty. He wanted a clean start. No schemes. No emotional armor. Just 2 damaged people trying to grow something real in poisoned soil. But he left the power in her hands. He accepted that some wounds could not be forgiven. The guard called time. Evelyn walked out without an answer. In the car, she finally broke, crying until her bones ached. A message from Chen glowed on her screen, asking if she had decided what to do with the drive. Evelyn stared at the phone, her mind full of competing horrors. Dante rotting in a federal cell. Innocent families caught in the crossfire. The canyon between the peaceful life she wanted and the violent world she was trapped in. Could broken trust ever be rebuilt? She slowly typed that she needed one more day. That night, the safe house walls seemed to close around her. She tossed and turned, replaying Dante's desperate eyes and wondering whether his apologies were real. At 2 a.m, an unknown number rang. Serena's voice came through the line. Serena said she had something to confess about the documents. Evelyn sat up, every nerve awake. "Don't play another game with me." Serena's voice cracked. They were fake. The words hung in the dead air. The documents proving Dante had married Evelyn for the trust fund had been fabricated, driven by obsession. Serena had forged the timeline, hoping Evelyn would walk away and leave Dante vulnerable. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs and accused her of lying again. But Serena finally had no polished answer left. "I wanted him to look at me the way he looked at you," she whispered, "and when he wouldn't I made sure you saw him as a monster." Dante had not known about the inheritance when he proposed. Then the line went dead. Evelyn sat frozen. If Serena was telling the truth, her grief had been built on smoke. Dante had chosen her before the money even existed. Everything he had said in that sterile visitation room might have been true after all. Their marriage had been torn apart by lies, but not the ones she had believed. She opened her laptop with shaking hands and searched the legal records. The dates proved it. The trust had been established after the proposal. Serena had not only poisoned the past, she had almost destroyed the future. At 3 a.m, Evelyn called Chen and demanded to see Dante at dawn. When Chen sleepily asked what had changed, she told him everything. Instead of relief, silence filled the line. Then Chen's voice turned terribly quiet. Dante had known the papers were forged all along. Evelyn demanded to know why he stayed silent. "Because he thought you deserved an out," Chen explained. Dante believed he was a curse on her life. He let her believe the worst so she could leave without guilt. Evelyn felt the floor drop beneath her. He had absorbed her hatred, signed the divorce papers, and let her accuse him in that cold cell, all to set her free. He had finally told the truth by sacrificing his own defense. That was not strategy. It was love from a man so broken he thought disappearing was the kindest thing he could offer. Evelyn picked up the cold flash drive and made her impossible choice. She walked into federal headquarters with it heavy in her purse. Facing the lead agent, she laid out her terms with steel in her voice. They could use the drive to dismantle the network. But Dante had to receive full immunity, and she needed to disappear. When the agent hesitated, she threatened to destroy the drive right there. He was baffled. Why vanish if her husband was walking free? But Evelyn understood Dante's damaged soul. He would accept the deal and stop fighting, only if he believed she was safe in witness protection. She had to break his heart to save his life. This time, the sacrifice was hers. 3 days later, the news exploded. A massive federal sweep tore through the city and dragged corrupt men into the light. Buried in the headlines was a brief note. Dante had secured immunity, and his wife had entered witness protection. Watching the broadcast from her lawyer's office, Evelyn asked Chen how long it would take Dante to realize her disappearance was fake. A week, he guessed. That gave her just enough time to rebuild the pieces of her life and decide whether Dante still had a place in it. Chen smiled sadly and said they were exactly alike, both willing to burn down their own worlds to keep the other safe. Evelyn did not answer. She hated how true it sounded. Evelyn stepped into the freezing cold and left her hollow life behind. 3 blocks away, Dante signed his immunity papers, his chest aching because he believed the woman he loved had chosen safety over him. He had no idea she was sitting in a nearby cafe, wondering if loving him again would cost her soul. For the first week, Evelyn became a ghost. She hid in a cheap motel under a fake name. In a dingy bathroom, she cut off her hair with dull scissors and watched her old identity fall to the floor. She traded silk dresses for faded coats and sat in parks like a silent shadow. Without Dante-senpai around her, she had to figure out what was left. Breathing without his name on her shoulders should have felt like freedom. Instead, it brought a cold loneliness. On the 8th day, Chen called with a warning that froze her blood. He knows. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. Dante had cracked the FBI's story and realized she was never in the program. The hunt was on. She stared into the motel mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Jagged hair, bare face, faded jacket, a stranger. Then her burner phone vibrated. A single message from an unknown number lit the dark room. "I know you are not in witness protection." The past had found the door again. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen, fingers trembling. Dante's message was restrained. "I know you out there. I'll wait. Just tell me you safe." She typed slowly. Unsafe. His reply came fast. "I want to look for you." Dante Moretti, a man who had built his empire on control, was offering surrender. Getting the space she had begged for hurt more than she expected. A broken part of her wanted him to tear the city apart to find her. Instead, he gave her freedom. even though it was breaking him. 2 weeks later, Evelyn walked into a tiny publishing house using her real name and her honest truth. She was no longer running toward Boston or away from Dante. She was finally standing still. She moved into a small apartment in Queens with a clanking radiator and a view of a brick wall. The rent cost less than a single dress from her old life. At her new publishing job, she poured coffee and read manuscripts. Nobody cared who she had married or what dangerous world she had left behind. For the first time, she felt like her life belonged to her. But when midnight came, she wondered if Dante was drowning in the same ache. A month later, the past walked into a coffee shop. Vincent Russo locked eyes with her. "You look good," he said. "How is he?" She asked quietly. Vincent sighed. His friend has pain written plainly on his face. "Miserable, but functional. He's going straight. Clean money." Mostly, Vincent corrected himself. A man at a bar mocked him about his wife leaving, and Dante put him through a table. A sad smile tugged at Evelyn's mouth. "Is he okay? Physically?" "Yes, but he misses you. He's bleeding inside." "I miss him too," she whispered. "I am not hiding. I am healing." Vincent nodded and admitted Dante asked about her every day. "I tell him you're safe and happy." "Is it true?" She thought of her quiet life, far from his violent empire. "I am working on the happy part." Vincent stood, his voice heavy. "He never loved anything but power before you. You broke something open in him. Ended us real." Under the city neon, Evelyn unfolded Dante's old letter. The ink still felt alive. "You became the only true thing in my life of calculated lies." She read the line again and felt the weight of it. Loving him had never been the problem. The real question was whether love could rebuild a house already burned to the ground. 3 months after leaving, she made the call. "I want to see him. Tomorrow, somewhere neutral." They arranged a fake private showing at an empty Soho art gallery. Silent paintings. Wide rooms. Enough space for 2 suffocating souls to breathe. Evelyn arrived early in simple jeans, her face bare. No designer armor. No borrowed identity. Just herself. Footsteps echoed across the hardwood. Evelyn, the deep voice sent a chill down her spine. Dante stood there without his invincible aura. He looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with desperate hope. He stayed 10 feet away, respecting a boundary he did not dare cross. "You look different," he said softly. "I cut my hair." "You look like yourself," he breathed, his voice breaking. "Like the woman I met before I tried to mold you into someone else." He swallowed hard. "I am sorry. For all of it." The silence of the empty gallery held them, 2 wounded hearts trying to find a new rhythm. "You've been staying out of trouble?" she asked. "Mostly," he said with a sad smirk. "1 bar fight. He deserved it." Dante smiled faintly. "How are you?" "Really am okay," she said. "I have a job. A life that's finally mine." "Are you glad?" His eyes darkened with honesty. "I am devastated you are not beside me. But yes, I'm glad you're rebuilding something of your own." Evelyn stepped closer. This was where the walls began to fall. "I talked to Serena," she said. Dante froze. "She told me the documents were fake. That you didn't marry me for the money." Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" His voice cracked. "Because you deserve to believe the worst of me. You needed permission to leave without guilt. I refused to trap you with the truth." Evelyn stared at him, furious and heartbroken. "You still don't get it. Do you keep deciding what I need instead of letting me decide for myself?" Dante dragged a hand through his hair and admitted how hard he had fought against his darkest instincts. Not manipulating, not lying, not pulling strings just to keep Evelyn near him. She stood her ground and demanded honesty, not another protector. So he gave it to her. He admitted that waking up without her was destroying him piece by piece. His penthouse had become an empty tomb where he sat in the dark, chasing the ghost of her voice. Yet he had refused to use his power to bring her back. Instead, he had given her time. Years if she needed them. Evelyn stepped closer, close enough to see exhaustion carved into his face. She mentioned the old letter. The line where he had called her the only true thing in his world of calculated lies. Dante's voice broke as he told her he still meant every word. Her walking away from his money and power had proved she was genuine. She had not stayed out of fear or comfort. She had simply reached her limit, and he knew he deserved it. Evelyn reached up and touched his cheek. The ruthless man went still beneath her fingertips. Then she offered a terrifying idea. Starting over. Not returning to the old marriage. Not pretending the past had never happened. Starting over. If he could stop trying to own the ending. Dante asked if she truly wanted that. Evelyn hesitated. She was not sure yet, but she was willing to try. There were conditions. She warned him she would be angry. She would push back. She would never again be the obedient mafia wife who accepted orders without question. She would not wait in the dark or pretend not to notice when he shut her out. She wanted a partnership, not a dictatorship. Dante simply agreed. Quiet and desperate, he admitted his failures. He had treated her like an accessory instead of an equal, and it had destroyed them. He had built walls instead of bridges, and it had cost him everything. Evelyn searched his eyes for the old strategist, but found only fear, the fear of a man who finally understood what losing her meant. There was no hidden agenda in his gaze. Only bone-deep exhaustion. Evelyn laid out her boundaries. She would keep her apartment and her career. She would not move back into his glittering penthouse to play pretend. They would go to real therapy with someone who was not intimidated by his power. Someone willing to drag their toxic patterns into the light. The final rule was simple. One lie, and they were finished forever. She begged him to walk away now if he planned to break her again. Dante carefully framed her face in his hands. With painful clarity, he confessed he had loved her from the beginning. Before he knew how to say it. Before he knew how not to ruin it. He promised to love her, even if she spent her life hating him. That was the only truth left between them. Evelyn's tears finally spilled over as she admitted how much she hated believing him. It would have been easier if he were only a cold, calculating monster. Easier to walk away from. But now she saw him for what he was. A deeply broken man who loved her in the only damaged way he knew. When he whispered another apology, she stopped him and demanded a kiss. Dante moved carefully at first, as if she were made of glass. But as their tears mixed, the kiss turned raw and desperate. When they pulled apart, breathing hard in the quiet gallery, she pressed her forehead to his. She warned him the road ahead would be ugly. There would be anger, fights, real change. Not empty promises. They stood in each other's arms amid the wreckage of their lives. Nothing was fixed, but it was a beginning. The next 6 months were brutal. Their therapist was sharp and unafraid, stripping away defenses and calling out every toxic pattern. There were fights so intense that Evelyn disappeared to her apartment for days. Dante sometimes slipped back into control, into the shadows he knew too well. But slowly, something lighter grew out of the dirt. Quiet dinners without masks. Late nights with takeout on her small sofa. Just being ordinary. Painfully and slowly. They began to unlearn what had hurt them. They learned to argue without trying to destroy each other. Some days the mountain felt too steep, but they kept climbing. 8 months after that tear-soaked night, Dante showed up at her door with a small box. Inside was not the cold, massive diamond his advisors had chosen for her. It was the simple, delicate ring she had loved from the beginning. Dante's voice was quiet as he admitted he had never been able to throw it away. He was not demanding a wedding. He was asking whether, somewhere down the road, she might consider a real beginning. New vows, new promises. He swore that if she said no, he would wake up the next morning and keep earning her trust all over again. Evelyn stared at the quiet metal, then slowly slid it onto her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. She looked up and told him to ask again in 6 months. If they survived the next 6 months, she would give him an answer. Dante smiled. Rare and genuine. Evelyn gave him one more instruction. Stop trying to control the ending. Let the future be uncertain. She told him, because that was part of what made love real. He pulled her against his chest. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope they might survive. And they did. 6 months became 2 years. Trust returned brick by careful brick. Evelyn kept her own space and her independence. Dante learned the hardest lesson of his violent life. How to love a woman without owning her. 3 years after she had nearly disappeared forever. They stood at an altar again. No political guests. No mafia alliances. Just two flawed people making vows they meant. The judge knew nothing of the scars between them. He only asked if they promised to honor each other. This time, when they said yes, the words carried the weight of a war survived. Afterward, Dante took her to a tiny Brooklyn place, with terrible wine, the same place where his heart had first started to soften for her. Halfway through dinner, Evelyn smiled. She realized that when he had once said she would never be a true mafia wife, he had not been rejecting her. He had been admitting she could never be a cold, convenient pawn. She was too alive for that. Too stubborn. Too real. Dante smiled softly and called her perfect. She shook her head. Not perfect. Real. They finished dinner slowly, away from the noise. Walking through Brooklyn, under amber streetlights, Evelyn felt something rare bloom inside her. Peace. Not because the past had disappeared, but because they had done the hard work of earning trust back. They chose each other with all their jagged edges visible. I love you, she whispered. Dante stopped, his dark eyes shining. I love you too. I know, she said softly. But I needed you to hear it, without all the fear that used to poison us. You're still damaged and impossible. But I love you anyway. He pulled her close. And you're stubborn and demanding. And I love you for it. They stood on that cracked Brooklyn sidewalk and kissed, while the city hummed around them. Two wounded souls who had to burn their world down before they could build something true. It was no fairy tale. It was jagged, painful, and completely theirs. Evelyn never caught that train to Boston. She did not need to. The truth she had been starving for was finally standing in front of her, stripped of its armor and willing to bleed honestly. She did not find peace by running to a new city. She found it by refusing to live inside a beautiful lie. Dante Moretti, the most feared ghost in New York, learned that real power had never been control. It was lowering the weapon. It was handing someone your broken pieces and hoping they stayed. They built a complicated life. He still worked late. She still fought him when he slipped back into old habits. But they laughed. Dante stepped away from the underworld, and Evelyn wrote her painful truths for the world to read. Their life was never perfect, but it was real. On their 5th anniversary, they returned to the terrace where he had once destroyed her world with careless words and a heavy coat over her freezing shoulders. The grand space was empty now, shut down and stripped bare. Still, they stood there as Manhattan glittered below like scattered diamonds. She asked if he ever thought about that night. Every day, he said, his voice heavy with old regret. He regretted breaking her, but not where the breaking had led them. Evelyn turned in his arms and looked at the man who had once chosen silence over love. Say it here, she whispered. Dante understood. His eyes filled as he held her face between both hands. You were never just useful, he said. You were never a strategy. You were my wife before I knew how to deserve the word. This time, the terrace did not break her. It gave back what it had taken. Somewhere inside all that pain, Evelyn learned how to bare her teeth. She learned to demand the truth, to walk away when she had to. And most of all, to choose herself over a comforting lie. When she finally returned to Dante, she did it with her eyes open. She knew exactly who he was beneath the tailored silk and cold control. He was a shattered man, learning how to love without possession. Just as she was a wounded woman, learning how to trust without disappearing. They were never going to be a perfect storybook romance. They were raw, imperfect, and deeply real. And on the terrace where he once made her feel like nothing, Dante held her like the only truth he had left, while Evelyn finally believed she was no one's asset, no one's shadow, and no one's beautiful lie.